A lot of people are sitting around the kitchen table with bills, trying to figure out what needs to be paid and how to plan for the coming months. If you've been laid off, had your hours reduced, or are worried about your industry, these might be really stressful decisions. Far too many Canadians are having these tough conversations about finances and their future. Just look at the numbers. Last week, almost 1 million people applied for employment insurance. The hard truth is that people are out of work because of this crisis and worried about what comes next. So I want you to know that we'll be there to help you. Our government is doing everything we can to be there for you.
Earlier this morning, the House of Commons has adopted an emergency bill for the purpose of helping people as quickly as possible, and the bill is now before the Senate. And I hope that it will be adopted quickly in order for us to be able to help Canadians as soon as possible. We will have more details for you later this week, and other measures will be announced. And this is only the beginning. However, this new bill enables us to take the necessary measures for the purpose of supporting you right away, including we will be increasing the child benefit and postpone by 6 months the student loan reimbursements. And we introduce the new Canadian emergency allowance, which will replacing the 2 previous allowances announced last year, the emergency care and the emergency support allowances, for the purpose of simplifying the process. And as I said from the beginning, as the situation evolves, we will adjusting our measures in order to better help you. The emergency allowance provides $2,000 each month for the next 4 months to workers who do not receive their paycheck because of COVID-19. So if you've lost your employment, and if you, whether you will be working full-time or under contract or self-employed, this allowance is here for you. If you're ill or quarantined, or if you're looking after somebody who is ill with COVID-19, this allowance is here for you. And if you have to stay home without getting any money for the purpose of looking after your children or elderly people, this allowance is here for you. And if you have another, and if you do not receive a new benefit, Canadian emergency benefit is here for you. So we have an online portal for the purpose of making requests as quickly as possible. And people will start receiving money within the next 10 days following the request. And
$1,000 a month for the next 4 months for workers who lose their income as a result of COVID-19. This will replace the 2 benefits we announced last week, the emergency care benefit and the emergency support benefit, in order to streamline the process. Like I said from the start, we will adapt our approach wherever needed. If you've lost your job because of COVID-19, whether you're full-time, contract, or self-employed, this new benefit will be there for you. If you're sick or quarantined, looking after someone sick, or at home taking care of your kids, it's there for you. And even if you're still employed but not receiving income because of this crisis, the CERB is there for you. An application portal will launch as quickly as possible, and people should start receiving money within 10 days of applying. I know people are concerned about delays. Families are worried about when they'll get help. It can be hard to get through on the line, and that is frustrating. Public servants are working around the clock while dealing with unprecedented demand and all of the same personal stress everyone else is facing. They will get to your application. Help is on the way. In order to speed things up, we're rapidly deploying workers from different departments to deal with claims. In the last 10 days, we've boosted the team by close to 13,000 people to take your calls, process your claims, and get you the support you need. And since last Monday, we've already processed 143,000 employment insurance claims. That means more money will go directly to people right across the country. We're working to get you the support you need when you need it. And if you're doing okay, there's a way you can help someone else, as an employer, a landlord, or even just a friend, so you can be part of the solution. it can make all the difference, because it's by working together that we'll get through this. And our team knows that. We're collaborating with the provinces and territories, as well as with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis Nation communities to coordinate our efforts and ensure that everyone is supported. Earlier this week, with the premiers, we also discussed testing for COVID-19. We know that how long you wait for your results varies widely. The premiers and I know we need to address that, and we are. This is something Minister Hajdu and I discuss with officials every day, and we'll continue doing what's needed to speed up results for everyone. But I also want to recognize the incredible work medical professionals are doing on this front. According to Dr. Tam, we're now testing about 10,000 people a day. That's a huge increase in numbers in a very short period of time. And it's because people across the country are working tirelessly to make it happen. At the same time, we're helping companies, labs, and scientific institutions produce and supply what we need most, from masks and ventilators to vaccines and antiviral drugs. We're collaborating with airlines to get Canadians home from abroad and instructing everyone that they must isolate at home for 14 days. We're also working with our international partners on this crisis. This morning, I had calls with President Sall of Senegal and President Kagame of Rwanda to share strategies on keeping people safe and addressing the economic impacts of this pandemic. I've also spoken to Prime Minister Abiy of Ethiopia and President Kenyatta of Kenya about international coordination. And tomorrow, I'll be speaking with other G20 leaders to discuss further global coordination to our response. Plus que jamais,
more than ever, it is absolutely essential for Canadians to have access to the last information, most recent information, but media also bear the consequences of the situation and the virus. So in order for us to help journalists to carry out even more essential work during a crisis, our government has announced supporting measures for the media. Secretary Guilbeault will provide more details later on. But I want, in the meantime, to thank all the media who provide information and keep Canadians abreast of developments, facts, and reliable info. We are grateful to you for your work.
Right now, it's more important than ever that Canadians have access to the latest news and information. To ensure that journalists can continue to do this vital work, our government is announcing new measures to support them. Minister Guilbeault will have more to say about this shortly, but I want to take a moment to thank our journalists and media for everything they do, today and every day. Above all, the most important way we can work together is by staying apart. Social distancing is our best tool to stop people from getting sick. I know people are seeing different graphs about how effective social distancing can be and new maps tracking the spread of this virus. Every time you turn on the TV or go online, you probably read something new. I know I do. And you'll want to know what's coming next. Today, I'll be getting the latest modeling from the Public Health Agency of Canada, and we'll discuss how to share this information even more directly with all of you. But you deserve the best information we've got about what's happening today and what tomorrow might bring, because otherwise, the uncertainty can be really tough, not just for your routine, but for your mental health, too. We're facing a once-in-a-generation challenge, and on top of that, you can't do many of the things that keep you feeling good, getting together with friends or having dinner with your neighbor. If you need help, reach out to your neighbor, to a sibling, to a friend, to a hotline. But do it from home. Don't go out unless you absolutely have to. If you're already following these rules, thank you for doing your part. If you aren't, know that you're making a dangerous choice, because ignoring these rules puts every single one of us, yourself included, at risk. Voici la réalité.
This is the reality. If people refuse to follow the directives, our doctors, our nurses will be more exposed to contracting COVID-19. And if our health professionals become sick, then they can't go to work, so they cannot cure and treat you if you become sick. Our country is confronted with the most important and the most serious public health crisis of its history. People who keep receiving friends for dinner and who keep socializing put everybody at risk. Our storekeepers, food stores, and even the people who look at look at the beans, the garbage bins. So if you have to go out, keep a distance of 2 meters from each person, and people, if you fly back from international flights, go back straight home and stay home for at least 14 days. And this has to be applied to everybody. If we want to go through this crisis, we all should be supporting one another, and we should all do our part. And I know that Canadians are able to up to the challenge. Thank you very much.
Bonjour, M. Trudeau. Louis Blouin de Radio-Canada. Je vous demanderais
Mr.
plus de
Trudeau, Louis
clarté
Blouin,
sur les
Radio-Canada.
échéanciers, si possible.
Do you have any
Le
more
6
clarity on
avril,
timetables?
que
April
M.
6th
Morneau
is what Mr.
le
Morneau
déploiement de
is
cette
giving us a
nouvelle
date for
prestation
deploying the new
d'emploi
benefit.
qui va arriver le 6 avril.
That's
Si on
when
va
it
mettre une
comes into
plateforme en
force.
ligne,
So what
avec
exactly
quoi,
is going to happen?
Et selon
Will there
ce
be an
scénario-là,
online
ça veut dire qu'il y a
platform?
des gens qui recevraient pas d'aide
People will
avant,
be receiving no help then before mid-April. What will you say to people who need help right now? We are working this is an unprecedented situation. We know how much pressure there is to help people as quickly as possible, but we also recognize that a very large number of people need to be helped within a very short time, and we need to establish quick but reliable systems to achieve that. That is what the government is working on, and we are, in fact, hoping to have the system in place online for April 6th, with money flowing in the very few days thereafter. We hope to be taking applications even before April 6th, but that's the date we're working towards. As for people who need help, we are well aware that there are many in difficulty now. People who stopped working almost 2 weeks ago will not be getting their usual paychecks, so we're doing everything we can by providing better access to credit and other measures. We are listening, we are doing everything we can to be there, but we will all have to work together to get through this.
This is an unprecedented situation with an overwhelming amount of demand by Canadians to get money as quickly as possible. We need to make sure we're getting that money out quickly, but also reliably to Canadians, and that means doing things that government hasn't done before and scaling up our processes extremely quickly. We need to do that in a way that is going to be both reliable and quick, and that's why we're pulling together people from across government to get this done. We are hopeful that the system will be up and running by the 6th of April, and that checks or the direct deposits will be flowing days after that. We recognize that that is a ways off still, and there are people who stopped working a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, that are now receiving their last paycheck and not knowing when the next money is kind of coming in. We recognize that. We're looking for ways to help people bridge through credit or other measures their ability to make it to the arrival of the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, but we will continue to work diligently and rapidly to make sure we're helping every Canadian we can.
Prime Minister Marika Walsh with the Globe and Mail. 60 business groups are calling on Canada to launch a wage subsidy that's in line with the UK and Denmark. So 70 to 80%, they say it would be much more efficient than the slow process that you're rolling out right now. You've been asked about this for several days now. Your question keeps being, things are still on the table, but people are laying off workers now. Now you seem to be saying that struggling businesses could choose to simply not pay their employees rather than laying them off. and the workers could then receive payments under this new benefit. Is that what you are urging struggling businesses to do, and why not go with the higher wage subsidy?
We are absolutely looking at more direct help for businesses. We recognize that in an ideal situation, businesses wouldn't have to lay off people, and people wouldn't have to feel like they've lost their job and don't have a job to come back to after this crisis. So we are working with business groups. We are working with small businesses, hearing their concerns, looking very carefully at the models put forward in other parts of the world, like Denmark and Germany and others, and looking at how we can make that work or make equivalent things work here in Canada. We will have more to say on that in the coming days. Nous reconnaissons que dans une situation idéale, les gens...
We recognize that ideally people would not lose their jobs because of what's happening, and that employers should not have to let people go. This is something we're trying to deal with them. We know that there are some models working in Germany and Denmark. We are providing help more directly through the Canadian Emergency Benefit, but we will also be providing direct assistance to small businesses. There'll be more on that in the coming days.
Oliver with CTV National News. I know you just talked about more direct support for businesses, but can you be more specific in the meantime? You said it will come out later this week. There are many businesses that have already laid off people. There are people at home who cannot afford to pay their rent, and those checks are due very soon. What specific aid is available right now for people who are sitting at home who cannot afford any of their bills?
Well, for businesses, we moved very quickly to make credit available for them, to help them bridge through this time, to help them get the liquidity they need at a time of crisis and significant slowdown in the economy. For people at home, we recognize that loosening up rules around credit is also a possibility. We've taken certain measures on that. We know people are anxious. We know that their final paychecks from 2 weeks ago, from last week, are starting to come in now, and they don't know where the next one is going to come in or when the next one is come in. That's why the Canada Emergency Response Benefit is going to flow as a way of giving them $2,000 every month for the next 4 months so that we can get through this together.
Bonjour, Raymond Fillon de TVA. Monsieur le Premier ministre, vous en êtes
Raymond
maintenant
Fillon,
à votre 14e
TVA. Prime Minister, this is your 14th day of self-isolation. Does that mean you can emerge from it tomorrow? And is your wife still having symptoms? Thank you for your questions. Sophie's feeling much, much better, and the children and I still have no symptoms. We will continue making sure we follow all recommendations by health authorities. That means that every day we are following the recommendations. If things change, we will let you know.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Janet Silver, Global News. With more than 1 million Canadians returning from overseas, especially in hotspots like Europe and New York City, why are we relying on the honor system and not using the Quarantine Act to isolate them, given we know that some people have boarded flights with symptoms just so desperate to get home?
It is extremely important that everyone returning to Canada isolate themselves for 14 days. This is a measure that will both keep them safe and prevent further spread of coronavirus through Canada. This is something that we require of every single Canadian coming to this country. We will continue to tell people that. We will continue to highlight that. We will continue to require that of anyone coming into Canada, that they isolate at home for 14 days in order to protect everyone in the country.
How can you require it if it's not mandatory?
It is required for people to stay at home for 14 days.
But it's not mandatory.
Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News. Prime Minister, we've learned that sick Canadian travelers are masking COVID-19 symptoms to get through airport screening. Why does Canada not test temperatures, screen air passengers for fever, or use thermal screening at airports? Should there be thermal screening and consequences for those who mask their symptoms?
We recognize that there are many concerns about passengers returning to Canada, which is why we're asking people to immediately isolate as soon as they get home. It is a requirement. We also know that there are different countries using various technologies, and we will continue to look at what is the best way to keep Canadians safe. There have been a lot of discussion around thermal screening and taking temperatures and spot checks. One of the lessons learned from SARS is that it is simply not as effective as the way people would like it to be, and it can sometimes give a false sense of assurance. This is what the best medical advice and best science advice we are getting is, but we are always open to hearing stronger or different science that says, or different recommendations that say it's worth, but we will make sure that what we choose to do, how we choose to deploy our resources are in the right way to actually help Canadians and actually arrest the spread of this virus.
But Prime Minister, should there be testing and should passengers who are returning to Canada, should there be consequences for those who mask their symptoms? And should these passengers also be forced to sign a document to make sure they self-isolate? How can you ensure that?
We know that people need to isolate when they land in Canada. They agree to an attestation in their processing when they arrive that they will self-isolate for 14 days. That is an important thing. And Canadians with symptoms will not be allowed to board flights coming home. That is a difficult measure, I know, for many people, for many families, but we need to make sure we're doing everything we can to keep Canadians safe.
But some passengers are masking their symptoms. What are the consequences for that?
Okay. We will continue to do what is necessary and have been explaining to people what it is they need to do in order to keep themselves safe and keep Canadians safe.
On va maintenant passer aux journalistes sur la ligne. Modératrice, c'est à vous.
Moderator.
Merci. Thank you. If you have a question, please press star 1 on your telephone keypad. Si vous avez une question, s'il vous plaît, appuyez sur étoile 1 maintenant.
Please press star 1 if you have a question.
Lavon Savance from Radio-Canada International. Please go ahead. Votre ligne est ouverte.
Canada, when you came to power, you announced that Canada is back. The United Nations is asking for $2 billion in emergency funding for COVID-19. Is your government prepared to join this fund? And is Canada setting aside equipment to send to countries that are very hard hit and cannot buy this equipment on the market?
In our $1 billion COVID-19 response announced last week, we had already set aside money for international efforts. We, of course, will work with the UN, continue to work with international partners on financial support to ensure that we can respond to this global pandemic with global resources. Canada will be there to participate. And I can also highlight on your second question that we are ramping up production of necessary equipment, of emergency medical equipment, of medications. We know that there is a potential need for much more in Canada, but there is certainly a need for much more around the world. And Canada will be part of the solution, not just to make sure that Canada has all the equipment and supplies needed for our citizens, so should the situation get worse, but we will have, hopefully, equipment and supplies to share with the vulnerable parts of the world that will desperately need help.
Merci. Prochaine question.
Next question.
Thank you. Merci. The next question is from François Carabin, Journal Métro. Please go ahead.
François Carabin, Journal Métro. Please go ahead.
Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau. François Carabin.
Mr. Trudeau, this is François Carabin from Metro in Montreal. Yesterday, the government of Quebec said that there would be a few more weeks until there would be enough masks and swabs to look after people. But on the ground, the figures seem to be a little different. And many people fear that there is simply not enough equipment. Can you guarantee that provinces will have the equipment they need to look after all patients? Thank you for the question. This is something that we have discussed at length, that we talked about at length during my conversation with the First Ministers. We know that needs are different across the country and at different times. We will do everything we can to ensure that every site has the equipment it needs to meet the immediate needs. We do have equipment across Canada that we can try to share, but we have to continue with our current efforts to increase the volume of equipment and essential products in stock. That is what we are doing. More coordination among provinces and jurisdictions will be needed to make sure that we meet the needs of Canadians regardless of where in the country they may be. Thank you. Last question.
Merci. The next question is from Justin Ling from Freelance. Please go ahead. Your line is now open. Votre ligne est ouverte.
Hi there, Prime Minister. Last week I asked you about the possibility of reducing the prison population to help combat a potential spread of COVID-19. Since then, I've heard from prisoners, inmates, and guards who have said that prisons are not ready, that their release is not being contemplated, that there's not enough soap, that sanitary conditions are even worse, and that guards are being allowed into the prisons even after returning from abroad. What, if anything, are you going to do to continue reducing the risk in Canada's federal institutions, and is releasing inmates, nonviolent offenders, on the table?
We recognize that the incarcerated population is at greater risk of contracting and spreading COVID-19. That is why we are working closely with Corrections Canada to ensure that we're looking at a broad range of measures to keep both those who work in our correctional facilities, but also those who are residents there, to make sure that we're doing things that will keep them safe. I have said multiple times we are not taking anything off the table in terms of options in order to keep Canadians safe, and we will continue our discussions with Corrections Canada to look at options and to look at ways that we're going to keep people safe right across the country, wherever they be.
Je vous remercie beaucoup. C'est qu'est-ce qui mettrait fin à la conférence de presse.
Thank you. That is the end of today's press conference. Thank you.